So thanks a lot for everyone for joining us in this second session of Lunch Salon. Just to give you a recap, we started this initiative with an idea to have like informal kind of session where we can like come share our opinions, have a good, healthy discussion. And for today, we have Pooja with us who's going to share her insights on GDPR. Now, it is something that we all use in our research projects, in our daily project management work within our consortium. And it's important to know deep into it what exactly it is and how it's important to be compliant with GDPR in our European projects systems. So I leave the floor to Pooja now, and I know that this session is going to be very informative, but I want it to be interactive as well. So towards the end, we all can like share our insights, and if we have some questions, we can all discuss. So Pooja, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ishita, and thanks everyone for joining. It's nice to be here and glad to support this initiative. So to begin with, I would like to start with a question, which is, have you ever received an email or a message from a company that you never gave your, details to? Did you made any experiences like that, that you are getting an email or a message or a phone call?
Yes. Emails, phone calls, a lot.
Okay, and how did you feel about it?
To me, I would say a little confused and scared because it's something or somebody where I have never shared my details with, and I'm just perplexed that how are they able to reach out to me? I don't even know them. I made no contact with them, and how is that possible?
Exactly. So, I mean, this is the reason why we are talking about this topic today and how it impacts us in a way that you're really wondering how, I am being contacted with this person and they already know about me, that, what am I doing, or what is the business that I have, and so on and so forth. So I think this is the most important or the critical challenge, that is associated with natural beings. And that's why GDPR matters to us, because it impacts us. So the agenda today will be starting with, we have already talked about why it matters. And then basically what is it all about and what must as a data subject. I will be today focusing more on the data subject, we as data subject. And so what you need to know about it, what are the core principles or the 7 pillars of data compliant handling as a data subject, or I would also like to touch a little bit on the controller and the processor side, and how these pillars or these principles are corely applied to projects and workflows that we have in our ecosystem. And then knowing when and how you can use this personal data, maybe accidentally, unintentionally, we might be overlooking at some point. So this could be a reminder that how we need to use it in our day-to-day lives and flows. And then we will look at the typical some of the examples around it. So to begin with, so that we all are on the same page, I would like to define some basic terms that are, that come naturally with GDPR, so that we know that when we refer to these terms, what do they imply and talk about. So as any natural person is what is referred to as a data subject, whose personal data are collected, stored, or processed. That's the definition of the data subject. And what belongs to personal data is any related information which can lead to identifying this natural person comes as personal data. Then someone who is collecting this personal data, a legal entity or a public authority or any body, which could be alone or jointly, is having any operation on this data, which is referred to as processing of personal data, is basically referred to as data controller. Then we have third parties or natural or legal persons or organizations or agencies who process, who again, does some operations on behalf of the data controller is what is referred to as data processor. And then finally, there's a very important term in GDPR, which is referred to as consent. And this is a very specific, informed document which cannot be unambiguous, which has to be very clear and concise to state what are the wishes that the data subjects must be obliged to. That is, if the data subject wants for this purpose, this data to be given, not given, changed, erased, so on and so forth. So I hope data subject, personal data, data controller, data processor, and consent, the basic understanding is very clear. I try to bring everything here in a very easy to understand language. But feel free to interrupt me when and wherever you see the need. So what all you must know about GDPR? First of all, GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. This is a regulation which is given by EU and which talks about the data protection and privacy, not just in EU, but also the European economic areas. So which includes and it addresses all the use of personal data by export of personal data outside EU and the EEA regions, which tries to give the citizens a control how their data must be exercised. And this law is all about that. And this came into force on 25th of May 2018, and it basically addresses all the businesses, organizations, etc., that collect, store, or process this EU data from EU nationals. And if these are not complied, then there are fines, that need to be paid. The overall scope, basically, as I just mentioned, that it applies to EU member states, and basically without these regulations not being meant or not being compliant, the transfer of information of EU nationals is illegal. So there has to be a very formal, legal, contractual way with which processing of the data, if the need be, must be done with data controllers or data processors. So uh, before I talk about the next topics, I have planned a short Menti exercise for everyone. So let's get started. I think someone has already started to take the poll. I see that there are 10 people who have joined the poll. So what do you think counts as personal data? Name as many examples as possible. So feel free to enter your insights on what you think is personal data all about. So we see name, age, gender, income, status, and then professional background, address. I will go to the next slide, which is, do you know which organizations are currently holding your personal data? Do you know? Can you be 100% sure on that? So we cannot be sure, or we can't say rather. So I can understand the dilemma that we have, that how we are so unsure where all our personal data is going. Let's look at the next thing. So just try to think, what's the most surprising place have you been asked to share your personal data? Whether it was a hospital, whether it was shopping website, or museum. Okay, that's nice. For me, it was my parents were here in Germany last year, and we went to Mount Titlis. I took them to visit Switzerland, and I took them to Mount Titlis, and I was surprised that okay, there they wanted to know, our personal data on nationality. So and yeah, so it was the most surprising place where my nationality was asked. Great. Thank you for sharing these insights. So we see one more entry, which is about shopping website, flights, hotels, etc. So I think we understand that how at unfamiliar places also we could be typically asked about our personal data, and that's really scary. Sometimes it could be really scary, believe me. Okay, so when we refer to personal data, what exactly we are talking about? So the definition, the GDPR definition says that any data which relates to an identifiable natural person is what is referred to as personal data. So maybe we can come here and see that typically there are different categories of personal data, which is the basic identity, including the name, email, phone number, etc. It could be the digital identity, which could be your IP address, cookies, device ID, login credentials, or some different identifiers, which including your national ID number, passport number, tax ID, and then coming to the health data or the biometric data, including your fingerprint, facial data, voice print, financial data, health data, employment status, online behavior. So these are very prominent examples of personal data which really impact our identity, that could be, if they go to someone else's hand, then could be dangerous for us. And similarly, we have examples of sensitive personal data, including the racial, ethnic origin, political opinions or religious beliefs, the genetic information, the gender orientation, the health data, so on and so forth. And some or most of this data is something that also is flown into our organizations, our projects, and several more than one way we use this data. and and that's how, and that's why we must be very clear on how we are using it and how we must engage the different stakeholders involved in the same to give most transparency and build their trust in these systems. So GDPR typically is all about trust, transparency, and confidence, that we say. And that's why consent is a very important parameter here. It's a very important document that must be uh, in place when we are talking about GDPR. So when we talk about consent, it is referred to as the legal grounds for processing data. That is, it is a contract with legitimate interest, having clear purpose, legal obligations known, and it must be very, very clear to why we are wanting this consent and how it must be adhered to. And always the data subject must be given an option to opt out, saying that could any time stop the usage of his or her data. And when we are taking consent, it must be freely given. So maybe you have made any experiences. Sometime you visit some websites, there are some check boxes for consent, and sometimes they are already pre-checked and you cannot even toggle, you cannot even reverse them. So by force, you want to use an app or you want to use a website for navigating some information, you have to accept it. You do not have a choice not to accept it, so which is something wrong. And you must write to such website owners or such app owners about that. uh, According to GDPR law 17, this must be, something that is not applicable, and your data should be erased, or they should not have pre-checked boxes to give a kind of a pressure on you to accept it. And that is the main reason why consent was included in GDPR. And typically it was to protect the rights of people when they are giving their data. So when we come to 7 pillars of compliant handling, we see that these are the key principles and some of the best practices that ensure that personal data is handled in a legal way, and this includes lawfulness, fairness and transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, identity and confidentiality, and accountability of all. And we will look one by one into all of these and then try to understand what they could imply. And I have also tried to include some examples in each one of them, and feel free to interrupt and ask questions wherever you see the need. So when we refer to lawfulness, fairness and transparency, so we say that data must be collected and processed in a fairly legal way, and the individuals or data subjects must know how their data will be used. So let's say you are visiting a website or a project website where you are signing up for a newsletter, and then to sign up for the newsletter there must be a very clear privacy notice explaining that what data is being collected, whether your name, your family name, your email address, your work orientation, your whatever other datas are there are taken, and why they are being taken, how long they will be stored, and when they and also there must be an explicit checkbox on the page where you tick yourself and not it is pre-checked. And also uh, on the page or there should be a contact somewhere in the website if you do not want your data to be used for, let's say you do not find the newsletter impactful and you want to opt out, so there should be a possibility that you're able to opt out. And this basically says that okay, now I don't want the data to be taken, and please, I don't want the subscriptions to happen, so please remove me from the subscription, and then you should not receive the newsletter then on. Also, you have signed for newsletter, but let's say the company is, because they already have your email ID, they start pushing marketing material to you, so that is also completely wrong. So fairness says for the purpose that you have signed must be obliged. So this is what is lawful, fairness and transparency all about. And then we talk about purpose limitation. So while designing the consent or while designing the purpose for which data subject data is taken, then we must focus that why you are collecting this data, what is the legitimate reason for it, and what will be the specific purpose for which this data will be used. So here I have tried to give an example where we see that we have an online retailer which takes the data for processing and delivering orders, and then this retailer must not use this data for any other purpose. So it has to be very specific, very clear on the reason for collecting the personal data. Similarly, the third pillar talk about data minimization. So what exactly we mean by data minimization? That is that only the minimum, I would like to stress on the word minimum, only the minimum data necessary, whatever is the minimum or the essential information needed, only that must be taken, nothing else. Or let's say if in projects sometime we take surveys, so for surveys what is the minimum information needed must be collected, must not be any further information collected that will not be put to use. So, and also again, if this information is being collected, you always have a right to withdraw this information or to kind of also see how you could benefit with this information. So yesterday while attending one of the working group meetings, so it was between an operator trying to suggest new features for a service, and then these new features, how would they impact the data subject and how further they were planning to monetize. So if they collect extra information about you, the end product is monetization. And then how it helps the user or the data subject should also be considered, or rather the other way around, we should not try, or we should give or protect only the minimum amount of personal data to adhere to GDPR. Then I think I had planned this exercise, but for the moment we will skip it because of the time. But let's see the next pillar, which is about accuracy. So when we refer to data minimization, it is something that we have the minimum data recorded, and then how this data must be maintained, how it must be updated, is something that is covered in Article 5.1D of GDPR. And this is typically very necessary to have an updated information for the legal purposes for which this data has been collected, and it must be stored only for the stipulated amount of time, and during this stipulated amount of time it must be updated and maintained. Say for example, there is a university which has students, and their contact information must be always updated for emergency contacts, addresses, and so on. So this is also one of the important pillars in GDPR. Next, we have storage limitation. So which is personal data, how should be kept, should be only kept for its intended purpose. And once that period expires, the data must be deleted or anonymized. So I think it's quite self-explanatory. Let's say if we have a website which is being deployed, for how long this website is active, and what is the data behind this website. If it is contractually known to be for 2 years, 3 years, then it must be only for that duration, and then it must be deleted or anonymized. It should not be continued to be there. Are there any questions so far? Okay, then let's look at the next pillar, which is about integrity and confidentiality. And what it exactly means is that the data which is coming from the data subject must always be protected in a way that there should be no unauthorized or unlawful processing. There should not be any accidental loss, or it, it should not get damaged due to any and should be maintained throughout the purpose for which it was collected. So by integrity, we mean that we keep the data correct, complete, untampered, and we ensure that all the information is up to date. When we talk about confidentiality, it is about that uh, only restricted number of people have access to it, or we say only authorized individuals can get access to this data. And with security, we overall mean, I mean, it's not just today's security, it's also about cyber security that we talk about, because today, in addition to physical, most of our data is in digital form. So how overall security should be met, or how different vulnerabilities should be uh, known before that that compliance is assured. So which includes typically encryption, firewalls or anti-malware tools, and kind of also security patches or updates that are being sent sometimes for different softwares, or also sometimes activities. So in the project context, in the technical project context, we have different platforms, and for these platforms, how security could be implemented. It's a two-way authentication. It's authorized only for certain authorized with credentials and so on and so forth. So here we also could look at some examples from financial services where all the customer data is encrypted with multi-factor authentication, and we maintain the system access, and there are regular audits and so that the breach and unauthorized access is prevented. So this is also one of the very important pillars. And last of these is something which is referred to as accountability. So accountability is something like do it and show it, which is this is in the context of data controller, where uh, the data controller is responsible for complying with all the 7 principles that we have just mentioned, but it's also a way how do you prove it that this has happened. So for examples, we can say that for demonstration, maybe you have something like, you say that okay, you employ all you apply all the GDPR principles, process the personal data with the regulations, you provide consent, you have data protection policy, so on and so forth. But then how you prove it, what is the way that you show that this was accomplished? So for this there has to be some kind of evidence or documentation or certain practices in place. And what are those practices? So there could be policies and procedures where everything is documented with the data protection policies. There could be data protection impact assessments, because if we are looking at the sensitive personal data, uh, so these are high risk processing when it comes to biometric information, health data, genetic data. So for those, we need to have data protection impact assessments. Similarly, records of processing activities. And also it's very important to train the staff who is handling personal data, and then kind of also have, if the data is going to third parties, then different contracts with the processors, how they are going to process it, whether the data is going outside of EU, so on and so forth. And finally, a very important part here is the breach response plans. So just in case that there is a breach, then how would how would that be handled? This could also include hiring of or deploying of the data protection officers, which sets clear procedures and policies for reporting and managing data breaches. So these are some of the most important criterias or pillars that we say that are necessary for GDPR compliance. Any questions so far? Okay. So since we have touched the point of breach and response, so let's quickly look what are the GDPR requirements for data breach. So these are typically covered by Article 34 and 33. So a data breach is unauthorized access by which there could be a disclosure, alteration, or destruction of personal data. So when we started the discussion, so there was a question that have you ever received an email from a company that you never gave your details to? So probably you provide your details somewhere where there has been a data breach and your information and your personal data is collected, and since now this personal data has gone into hands where you are not aware of, where you have not given your consent to, but it is being used for more purposes than one. And then what should be done? What can we do? The first thing that needs to be done is, if you have received an email like that, then try to find out from which organization it has come. Try to look at their data protection policy or the data protection declaration, and try to find out the contact who is listed there, and try to mail to them that with Article 17 of GDPR, which is the right to erase your data. With that article, you can say that you that your data needs to be deleted, and it must be done and must be confirmed. Otherwise, you could report to the governing authorities around your local area. So this is something very actionable. But typically, if there is a project, if there's an organization where this data breach has happened, then how they are going to handle it, or they could handle it. So the first action here is to, once you know that there has been a breach, then the first most important thing is to first contain the breach. That is uh, uh, shutting down the systems which are being affected, disconnecting them from the network, and then first also notify the supervisory authority and the related National Data Protection Agency, and this must be done within 72 hours of the discovery of the breach. So this is the first thing that needs to be done. And then also then you need to disclose the nature of the data breach, what categories of the data, how many data subjects were affected, and then this information must also be kind of sent to the authority as well as to the data subjects. And then you need to also explain what were the measures that were taken to mitigate the breach in future, and kind of strengthen also the security measures that you have, that you could further, uh, employ once you have identified the gaps and the vulnerabilities in the systems. And then finally, always notify the data subjects on what actions you are working on and how uh, this will be handled. So these are some of the steps that I just mentioned: containing the breach, access the extent of the breach, that is how far the damage has happened, and then there must be an investigation to understand what was the reason of breach, notify the affected parties, review and strengthen the security measures, understanding the gaps, monitor that there are no further threats, have an audit, and so on. And then try to learn from the breach and try to do a post incident review and learn from this experience. So these are some of the bodies that where you can find specific and detailed information on the topic, and these are some of the articles that are in GDPR which relate to the data subjects. And here you can see the article 17 that I just mentioned, the right to erasure, that is the right to be forgotten. And similarly, if you also find that at some place your data is not correct, then there we have article 16, right to rectification. So I'm not going more deeper into each article, but they are just for your reference in case you need it. And just to summarize the presentation today, so we tried to have an understanding on the core principles and the purpose of GDPR, also recognize what constitutes personal data and how it should be handled. Today, we briefly learned about what are our rights as data subjects under GDPR and how projects or organizations could respond to that. And we looked at some practical implications. So here are some references. If you are further interested in this topic, please feel free to go through these references. And that's all about. Thank you very much for listening and being active in the discussions and Menti.
Thank you so much, Pooja. It was really, really insightful. We got to know a lot about different pillars of GDPR and the articles that we should be aware about. Of course, it's difficult to know the details and the intricacies, but I guess it's important for all of us because we are dealing with personal data and it has become such a sensitive issue that just to have a common knowledge, it's helpful. Before moving on, I would like people to come up and share their experiences, or if you have any questions for Pooja, please feel free to let us know here. We still have some time and it would be nice to have a little discussion if we can. if anyone has some curiosity or any questions or would like to share some of your experiences regarding GDPR, or because all of us are working in Horizon Europe projects and we have quite some knowledge about this right now. Some at some point, I think we all have dealt with it, or this term has come across to us. So it would be nice to hear your thoughts and opinions about it.
I think it's also important to think today, what happens if you lose your wallet? How will you be impacted? And just in case you lose your email password, and it gets into hands of someone. So which is more dangerous, there has to be a retrospective on, on one side you see, okay, your wallet, you see the immediate loss, but when it comes to digital identity, exposure, or your email password getting in hands of someone. So
Yeah.
imagine that loss or that impact that you would have, down the line. And one is
Actually,
very
whenever I
straightforward,
travel,
and the other one is,
yeah. No, you have rightly mentioned it. Like whenever I'm traveling, I'm like super careful and very alert of my belongings. Like, and I keep on thinking to myself, like, if I lose my wallet or my phone, like, I don't even know what I'm gonna do next. How am I gonna survive? Like, everything will be gone. So, because these days we don't even remember like basic things like phone numbers or like people, how can we contact them, or like our passwords and everything. Everything is like so. It's just like, for example, in my laptop, everything is using my fingerprint. So I don't remember any passwords. So it's kind of like scary to think about it, but at the same time, it shows us that yes, we have to be like more alert and we have to be more cautious and we have to like, note these things down somewhere else. And also, if such things happen, we need to know what are the steps we need to take immediately. So of course we are gonna panic or something like that, but we need to know how to protect ourselves in those kind of situations.
Exactly. And I think, again, reflecting back to the first question, which I
Mm.
started, that, having received an email or a message from a company you never gave your details to. So the best way is to kind of, reflect and write to them that with this article, please delete my data. And I do not authorize you to use my data, for any other purpose. So that makes it really clear and loud that the
Mhm.
message is conveyed, and then maybe, yeah, you can go in a legal way if it's really critical. Yeah.
Yeah, this led me to think something like, for example, you mentioned so many articles about GDPR, and we were talking about consent. You mentioned about consent in your presentation. Like, I'm sure like consent also comes with so many privacy policies. And like if we are not coming from that kind of background where we have studied these kind of policies and articles, how do you think, like, is it possible to make it more user friendly or transparent or easy to understand as a beginner who is like stepping into this or area of regulations or policies? Like first we need to know these articles or these policies and then we can fight back.
Mhm.
So it makes me wonder like how user friendly or easier it is to navigate.
I would suggest, in this context, to approach to your data protection officer, maybe in the project or in the company, and then they can guide you from there. Or just if it is just a consent. So if you are asking data from someone and you want to get consent from that person, then first important thing is you mention that what is the purpose for which you want the data,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then
Right.
the next thing is how you are going to use this data.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Then is it going to be local,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be possible that it is going outside of Europe?
Mm-hmm.
Then how much time will the data be stored?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
And then they will always have the right that their data could be deleted.
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
in between, you can ask them, to check if this data remains the same or there has been a change.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
these are some very important constituents, I would say, for the consent document.
Right. And also, like with AI becoming so prevalent, I just wanted to know, like, is GDPR having something which is like protecting, for example, the decision making or the automations or individual rights, or do we have another act for it? Because I recently heard about the EU AI Act, for example. So are these two separate things, or under GDPR, do we have something which is related to AI?
So in GDPR, we do not have a direct relation to AI, but we do have a relation that is automated decision making. So,
Okay,
and also you would see in some of the definitions, it always starts with the term natural or legal. You know,
right.
natural refers to a living human being.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's how it's very specific to the natural human being. And
Right.
that's why there is a separate act, which is AI Act.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, with GDPR, when we talk about integrity, confidentiality, and security, part
Yeah.
of it is taken care in terms of that certain processes like pseudonymization, anonymization, encryption. So the in some way it is there, but not all that is covered with GDPR. So definitely for if use of AI in project,
Mhm.
you need to refer to AI Act and then see how you could make compliance. Maybe that's the topic for the next series to it.
No, this is very interesting. Like personally for me, it's nice to know about these kind of like topics and like just to have like more brainstorming, and of course it leads to one topic or another, and somehow we all are dealing with such GDPR regulations on our day-to-day life as well. So it's important to have good knowledge about it. So I just, since we are over 3 o'clock, and I would just like if somebody has any closing remarks or just a quick thoughts about how they felt about our session today, or anything that you would like to just let us know here. Okay, if anything, I'm sure Puya's, you have her email ID or her contacts, and if you have any more questions for her, you can go back, think about our discussion today, and write back to her. I'm sure she'd be happy to get your interesting questions and answer them.